Married for 10 years, Tina rode my coattails to success but always hated me to the core. After I died, she took over my family's company and married her first love. On their wedding day, Linda, once betrothed to me, blew up the ceremony. Before the flames devoured everything, Linda smiled and said, "He died, and you think you can just rise to the top? No way that's happening." Then I woke up back 10 years. I was holding Tina's hand, going to see Linda to break off the engagement. She looked at me indifferently. "Are you sure about this? Breaking up with me for her? Ben, I don't take people back once they're gone." Linda's familiar cold voice cut through my thoughts. I was still lost in the memory of that explosion. The overwhelming flames felt like they could reach my floating soul. Linda stood with a gun, surrounded by the fire, pulling the trigger with a mocking smile. "He's dead, letting you all rise effortlessly. When does such good fortune exist?" In that moment, the invisible chains on me shattered. Something clicked in my head. I realized my past life was actually like one of those toxic redemption stories, where I played the villain. I'd set my sights on Tina, a poor student back then, and coerced her with her mom's medical bills. Forced her to date me through my financial aid. Tina thought I humiliated her with money, and hated me for years. After marriage, she schemed to take over my company and kept in touch with her first love. She drove me insane, landed me in a mental hospital, watched me jump to my death. Then she turned into the hot new wealthy bride and married her first love. I finally understood. Linda and I were practically inseparable childhood friends. How did it end up in that past life, with me being smitten out of nowhere when Tina appeared? I snapped back to the present, surveying the room. There were two sets of parents with different expressions. Linda was sitting on the couch looking up at me, her eyes sharp as ever. And it hit me today, this was when I break things off with Linda. Today was supposed to be a family gathering. I showed up late with Tina in tow. Came in and announced to break the engagement with Linda. "I never liked you and now I have a girlfriend. So you're here to break up with me for her?" Linda adjusted her glasses, looking Tina up and down with clear disdain. Tina squared her shoulders and fired back. "Feeling good? You're just better off due to where you come from. Better off, huh?" Linda smirked with a hint of ridicule. "You better realize if Ben hadn't brought you here, you wouldn't even get the chance to speak to me." That hit Tina's fragile pride hard. In the past, I saw her red eyes filled with humiliation and felt heartbroken. I stood in front of her, spat insults at Linda without thinking. I accused her of being pathetic, obsessive. Said she was the one who got a girl run over after writing me a love letter in high school. "Linda, seeing you makes me sick. Besides your background, how are you better than Tina?" I threw terrible words her way, and Linda stayed silent like a statue. Finally, she agreed quietly, "Fine, let's break up." Tina eyed me icily. "Ben, you brought me here just to get humiliated?" I dug my nails into my palm, trying to clear my head from this post-rebirth chaos. With her words, I suddenly laughed. "Humiliate? Linda just stated the truth. You I'd only play with. It's not worth her breath. Don't overestimate yourself, Tina." Silence fell over the living room. Everyone stared at me in shock. Linda lifted her head, her glasses catching the light. Behind them were two eyes like fragile glass showing faint surprise. "What did you say?" Tina looked mortified. I said, "Do you really think you compare to Linda? She forgets our business deals. I let you piss her off on purpose." I let go of her hand, stepping back as if avoiding something dirty. "Get out." Tina looked at me, stunned, but the butler escorted her out. Just before leaving, she threatened, "Ben, I'm not yours to order around. Next time, even if you kneel, I won't reconcile." Her confidence made me want to laugh and cry, but I couldn't focus on Tina now. I hurried to Linda's side, kneeling. In the past, after the breakup, I learned that Linda went to the hospital that night. She had stayed on that couch because of her stomach issues during an overseas business trip but came back to see me. I met her only to end the engagement. I was a jerk. Linda looked into my eyes, comprehending with a mocking smile. "Trying to piss off your girlfriend using me again?" I couldn't blame her for thinking that. In the past, I did stupid things to prove Tina cared about me by annoying Linda. Now I softened my voice, acting clueless. "Girlfriend? Linda, it's only you." She gazed at me. "I'm not feeling well. Can you come with me to the hospital?" Linda furrowed her brow. "What's wrong? You got period cramps too?" Without thinking, I said, yeah, cramps. She side-eyed me. Did you burn your brain? Because of Tina, we've been in a cold war. I didn't expect her to still care about my health. My heart swelled with a sudden rush of emotions. Well, my stomach's acting up a bit. I carefully tugged at her sleeve and gave it a little shake. I have to get a shot. Can you come with me, please? Linda seemed lost in thought for a moment before calmly responding, all right. In the car, I called for a driver, insisting that Linda shouldn't drive. She didn't argue, just sat next to me in the back seat. But there was a distance between us. I asked softly, Linda, are you mad at me? She gave a slight self-deprecating smile. How could I dare? Those 4 words filled me with overwhelming guilt. In my previous life, the storyline had me wrapped around its finger. My parents couldn't sway me and just watched as I married Tina. I supported her company, using my family's resources tirelessly. Linda was always competing with Tina for projects, so I saw her as an adversary. Those 10 years we barely met, and I never greeted her kindly. Linda, I sniffed a bit and asked suddenly, it's been 2 months, did you miss me? Linda gave me a fleeting glance, then stayed silent. I felt awkward and tried to make small talk. This time you didn't bring me a gift. Last time you called my gift dirty and threw it away, she replied coldly, turning her head and closing her eyes, clearly not interested in continuing the conversation. Last time she returned home, she brought me a box full of rubies. As she handed it over, she casually said, use these to make some trinkets. Stop hanging around with low-grade stuff. Both the rubies and her words had hurt Tina's pride. To please Tina, I threw the box back at Linda. I don't need your filthy stuff. Thinking about it now, I shut my eyes in regret, cursing the foolish storyline I was trapped in. In reality, I tried to close the gap between us, inching closer to Linda. I leaned into her, resting my chin on her shoulder, and whispered, you know, Linda, there's something I need to tell you. My warm breath stirred a few strands of her hair. Linda suddenly opened her eyes and moved away. It doesn't matter what charade you and Tina are playing today, I won't listen, she said, not letting me finish. She paused, and if you're feeling unwell, stay put. Her face was stern as she scolded me, but I noticed her ear and neck turning red, a hint of awkwardness in her posture. Linda, I cautiously said. You won't. She persisted, just sit still. Her voice was slightly hoarse as she continued, don't worry about my issues. When the car stopped at the hospital entrance, the tension between Linda and me had softened a bit. I remembered her struggles with stomach pains and took her arm for support. Suddenly, an angry voice cut through the air, Ben. Turning around, I saw Eric, Tina's first love, glaring at me furiously. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Stopped Aunt Tina's medication to force her to bow to you. His eyes teared up as he looked past me. You promised if I disappeared, you'd get that expert to treat Maggie. Are you going back on your word? Tina hurried past me and pulled Eric behind her, lowering her gaze. It's my fault, Ben. I'm not mad about what you did today. Just don't make things hard for Eric and my mom. I'll always listen to you. Then it hit me. In my past life, it was actually through Linda's connections we got the expert for Maggie. Before I had a chance to explain, Linda withdrew her arm and gave a mocking smile, her eyes cold and knowing. So this is why you wanted me at the hospital, huh, Ben? Her face bore a brittle expression, one I knew all too well. Every time we fought over Tina, she looked at me like this. Back then, ensnared by the narrative, I was absorbed in Tina, finding Linda's stance irritating. Now the thought pained me and I instinctively denied no. But she didn't look back at me. Her eyes fixed on Tina. If you think so little of me, prove your worth without dragging my fiancé into this charade. Aren't you ashamed? Tina's jaw clenched, humiliation in her eyes. Linda, don't think you're all that. One day you'll regret these words. Without responding, Linda walked away. As I was about to follow her, Tina held me back. Ben. She looked down, voice soft but raspy, pleading, it's all my fault, don't be mad. Touched by her cold hands, memories from my past rushed back. The feeling of a venomous snake coiling up. Don't touch me. Disgusting. I spat, yanking free from her grip. Tina looked stunned, not expecting this from me. Before, no matter the anger, I'd always yield when she softened. Ben. She tried to speak, but I cut her off sharply. You always said my money insulted you. Transfer the 60 grand I paid for your mom's treatment to my account within 3 days. Show me how independent you really are. Leaving Tina behind, I ran to catch up with Linda at the hospital entrance. Linda. I was out of breath as I caught her sleeve. Before I could speak, she turned to me. Ben, we do have some history, but that doesn't mean you can push me to back down for Tina without any limits. She said coldly, trying to pull her sleeve back, but I held on tight. It has nothing to do with her. Alright, I admit I didn't come to the hospital because of a stomach ache. I wanted to bring you here. Your stomach's acting up again, isn't it? Linda, don't think I don't know. You don't eat properly when you're out making deals. She looked at me, startled, her eyes scanning my face, trying to decide if what I said was true. Seeing her start to soften a bit, I pushed further. I practically dragged her to the examination room. The doctor looked at her report, frowning. Chronic gastritis needs careful attention to diet, especially when it's uncomfortable. Don't tough it out, come to the hospital as soon as possible. Let's start with 2 days of 4 drip. Sunlight poured through the window, flooding the room. When it was just me and Linda in the room, the air got quiet. I ordered some porridge for delivery, then cooled it with a spoon before bringing it to her lips. Linda kept her eyes down, lost in thought. The doctor said you should eat something. If you don't, the 4 will make you feel sick later. I reminded her gently, and she finally looked up at me. Her eyes caught the sunlight, sparkling like water. Okay, she whispered, finally opening her mouth. After half a bowl, Linda signaled for me to put the bowl down. The phone. I passed her the phone with a puzzled look, watching as she typed in a string of numbers. What's this? Dr. Fong's number, that tumor specialist you've been wanting to reach. I looked up sharply, seeing Linda's pale face and that faint, bitter smile around her lips. I suddenly understood. She still thought I had an ulterior motive. You brought me to the hospital, I give you what you want, so we're even. I don't want the next time you come asking me for her to bring today up, saying watching me eat made you sick. Ben, I'm human too. The sunlight slanted across the room, casting a rare vulnerability over her aloof expression. I felt a tightness in my chest, unable to speak. I remembered what Linda said. 3 months ago, Tina's studio aimed for a project, and Linda was the decision maker from the client's side. So I went to plead with her, cooked her a meal, and brought gifts. When Linda was in a good mood, I asked, could you let Tina's team handle that project? Linda's smile faded almost instantly. She set her chopsticks down, looking at me. So you came today for Tina as well? Tina really is capable. I tried to argue, but she cut me off with her cold voice. People who are truly capable don't need backdoors to win projects. Go back, I've reviewed the proposal and made my decision. I won't choose her. Linda stood, pulled out a chair and showed me out. I lost it, angrily pointing at her nose. If it weren't for Tina, I wouldn't want to see you at all. Just watching you eat my food makes me sick. Through blurring eyes, I felt a hand reach out to brush the moisture from my eyes. That's when I realized I was crying. Linda withdrew her hand, saying softly, no need to feel wronged. After today, I won't look for you anymore. Ben, we're even now. Given my past, it's normal she doesn't trust me. I tried convincing myself while holding back tears, looking earnestly at Linda. I'm sorry. She seemed startled. You can't force feelings, you don't have to apologize. When we get back from the hospital today, I'll explain everything to your parents. We'll call off. Her words were cut off by my sudden kiss. Linda's eyes widened, staring at me in disbelief. I awkwardly lingered on her lips before pulling back a bit, holding her hand and catching my breath. No calling it off. I steadied myself and continued, Linda, believe it or not, the stuff with Tina, it wasn't what I wanted. I brought you to the hospital because you looked unwell, and I was worried about you. She looked down at me, her emotions stormy under thick lashes, unclear. Is this some new trick? I swallowed my bitterness. We've known each other my whole life, so you can't not believe me. If you don't, I'll kiss you again, I said, leaning in once more. But Linda pressed her forehead to mine, stopping me. Her breath was so close, her voice slightly hoarse. Ben, do you know what you're doing right now? I nodded, knowing, reliving what we did when we were 18. That sentence, it was like lighting a fuse, burning away all of mine and Linda's rational thoughts. On the night after finals, my family threw a party for me. I had a few glasses of champagne, drunkenly dragging Linda into a room. I asked her, what does kissing feel like? She quietly watched me. Ben, you're drunk. I was a bit annoyed. Don't change the topic. If you don't tell me, I'll find someone else. My words were cut off when Linda kissed me. She carried a gentle lemongrass scent, just like the gift I got her for her birthday that year. Her lips and the fingers on my neck were hot. My mind was a blur, clinging to her shirt as I was overwhelmed by her heat. Linda's voice held a hidden desire. That's what a kiss feels like. Back then we were so good together, so close. I always thought after graduation I'd marry Linda. But soon after starting college, seeing Tina for the first time, it was like getting pulled into a storm I couldn't resist. Wait, how'd we end up here? Did the four really get messed up? A nurse came to redress Linda's four, gently reminding, don't move around, one more bottle to go. Linda nodded calmly. Sitting beside her, I rubbed my warmed ears. After the nurse left, I whispered an apology, sorry about that. I got so lost in the kiss earlier that I must have pushed on Linda's arm, shifting the four needle. The bandage was all soaked in blood. She glanced at me, no need to apologize. So, do you believe me now? Depends on how you act. Her words were tough, but her tone had softened a bit. As the month came to a close, Linda needed to travel to a neighboring city for business. I went back to class, but I couldn't help sneaking quick texts to her. I wanted her to know that she was always on my mind. Linda's birthday was coming up. That afternoon, I decided to hit the mall and pick out a gift for her. Out of nowhere, I spotted a familiar silhouette. It was Tina. We hadn't talked since my harsh words at the hospital, and honestly, I was enjoying the break. But seeing her now, during what should have been my busiest time at the studio, following a young woman into a garden restaurant, caught me off guard. My heart sank. I hurried forward a few steps. As I walked in, the woman turned her head. It was like being struck by lightning. I froze. That woman was none other than Wendy. In a past life, she had teamed up with Tina to ruin Linda and Ben's family. I stealthily tailed them, hiding behind some greenery just to catch bits of their conversation. Linda's already in London. Seems she hasn't caught on to the problems with that project. Project? Tina scoffed coldly. I want more than just her business, I want her life. In my past life, I often wondered why. Linda was the best, taking over her family's business. Why did she always lose to Tina, eventually losing most of her family's company to her? Was it because she had some kind of protagonist advantage? Did she have insider info? What was that project in London all about? Questions swirled in my mind. I wanted to ask Linda but feared that confronting Tina too soon might speed up the original chain of events, pushing Linda further towards a doomed ending. After much thought, I decided to start with Tina and gather intel to prevent Linda from falling into danger due to the past storyline's influence. Once home, I had the housekeeper make some soup and took it to the hospital. Sure enough, I ran into Tina at the hospital. She shot me a cold glance without a word. I adopted a submissive tone, tugged at her sleeve, and tried to mimic the spoilt yet vulnerable manner I used before. You're not still mad at me, are you? I'm really upset too. You promised not to have any more contact with Eric, yet here he was at the hospital yelling. Who does he think he is? A flicker of disgust crossed Tina's eyes, but she masked it well. I've already gotten rid of him, she replied flatly. He was only worried about my mom's health that day. It won't happen again. Better not. Don't forget I'm your boyfriend. I said, by the way, I spoke to Linda. She mentioned an expert might operate on your mom, but it might take some time. She's tied up with an investment project that hit a snag. Tina's throat moved slightly as she turned to me. What snag? Pretending to recall, I said something about the suburbs, I think. For the rest of the day, Tina suddenly became quite friendly with me. She kept fishing for info about Linda, wondering if she knew anything. Acting as if I wanted to reconcile with Tina, I finally got invited to a dinner with Wendy and others. Before leaving, I got a bit anxious and called Linda to let her know. But her phone was off. Thinking it through, I decided this was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. In the privacy of a secluded dining room, Wendy raised her glass to me. Mr. Ben, I'm looking to invest in Tina's studio. I'm Wendy. Maybe we'll work together someday. Thinking about how she and Tina destroyed Linda's career and took over my family's business made me sick, but I played nice. After a few drinks, Wendy casually brought it up. I heard you and Linda were childhood sweethearts, even engaged? Engaged? That's just gossip from our parents. I glanced at Tina, forcing myself to sound sincere. My whole life, the only person I ever liked was Tina. If it wasn't for her, I'd never tolerate being around someone I despise. As I spoke, I vividly pictured Tina and Wendy's faces, the hatred so real and intense that everyone laughed. Ben certainly knows how to see through Linda, Wendy chuckled, leaning in. Mind sharing why she's in London? Alcohol taking its toll, I stood up. Excuse me, I'm feeling sick, I need the bathroom. I stumbled to the door, opened it. A cool breeze carrying a hint of lemongrass hit me. The light cast a soft glow on a familiar face. Startled, I snapped back to reality. Linda stood at the door, her expression blank. When she saw me, she faintly curled her lips. Ben, so this is how it is. The hallway lighting was warmly inviting but felt cold against Linda's face. She had heard everything. Among the mixed smells, I suddenly latched onto a thread of clarity. My drunken haze vanished. Fingers trembling on the door handle. A sense of dread washed over me. Instinctively, I called out, Linda. Better not call me that, might just discuss myself again. She cast a disappointed and icy glance over, then past my shoulder, landing on Tina and Wendy behind me. You want to know why I went to London? Why don't you ask me directly? She let out a chuckle, her voice taking on a sharp, decisive edge. You think planting a few spies in the company will sway my judgment? Your tactics are as laughable as you. Clowns. With that, she turned and left. In the room, Tina looked grim and suddenly knocked over a plate. Feeling smug, huh? Think that's all I've got? One day, I'll watch her die right in front of me. Deep down, I wanted to slap her, remembering the original plot but still not daring to take it lightly. I forced a smile, saying, I'll go back with Linda first and see what she found out. I turned and left right after. I caught up to her downstairs, just as she was getting into her car. Linda, I panted, speaking quickly, listen, I came today to find out what plan Tina and the others have against you. Through the half-open window, meeting Linda's calm, deadpan eyes, my voice faltered. She rested her chin on her hand, looking amused, even smiling slightly. You're probably about to say it's because you like me, worry about my safety, and fear I can't handle them alone? Panic and anxiety bubbled up like ocean foam from the heart. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to calm down and explain seriously. Yes, I know you don't trust me, but Tina isn't as simple as you think. If her tactics were only this basic, I wouldn't. Ben. Linda cut me off abruptly. Through the slowly closing window, I saw her still beautiful eyes, though seemingly shattered. You can't rely on my love for you to continuously deceive me without boundaries. From now on, let's not stay in touch. She finished, and the window shut completely, blocking everything out. The black Rolls-Royce drove off without hesitation. I was left standing there alone. The cool night breeze sent a sudden shiver through me. In the previous life, after I married Tina, Linda had repeatedly warned me about her ambitions, telling me to be careful. No matter what she said, I never believed her. I'd even laugh at her. You're just jealous of Tina, jealous she came from an ordinary background and now stands above you. You full of lies, I won't believe a word you say. That time, Linda stood before me, wearing a perfectly styled dress, but her eyes were deeply hurt. Coming back to my senses, I was already in the car, told the driver to head to Linda's place. Yet Linda didn't go back to the home or her own house. The car drove around half the city and finally stopped in front of her company. I looked up and saw a light still on in the top office. Remembering the resistance on her face before the window closed, I felt a sudden bit of cowardice. So I went to a nearby store and bought a can of beer, downing it quickly for courage. Once the buzz began creeping back, I headed into the elevator and pressed the button. Linda's office was on the 39th floor, quite private, but she'd never put up defenses against me. When I pushed open the door, the large office was empty. From the closed-off adjacent room came the faint sound of running water. Beyond that, there was only the light scent of lemongrass mixed with a slight hint of blood. Blood? My heart tightened, flashing with countless scenes from the past life. I pushed open the adjacent room door without thinking. Just as I opened it, the water stopped suddenly in the bathroom of the resting room. Linda walked out, toweling her wet hair, but stopped abruptly upon seeing me. Ben. My gaze involuntarily fixed on her. I've always known Linda was beautiful, but most of the time she wore a cold expression, seeming distant. However, now the water mist softened her features. She had a few layers of bandage wrapped around her left forearm. They were wet now, with some blood showing through faintly. She was indeed injured. Get out. Perhaps my heated gaze was too obvious, She closed her eyes briefly and commanded sharply. But it lacked authority. Maybe it was the alcohol or instinct, but I blinked. Instead of leaving, I took a few steps closer, closing the door behind me. "You're hurt," I said, stepping in front of her. "Linda, how did this happen? And your wound is bleeding again. It needs to be redressed." "Just a small injury." Linda replied plainly, "I'll handle it myself. It's none of your concern." Pausing, she added, "Mr. Ben, you shouldn't be in my office. You do have a girlfriend after all." I just pulled her in for a kiss, the smell of alcohol mixing with the closeness, cutting off her words. "Don't talk. Nothing you're saying is what I want to hear," I murmured somewhat incoherently. Slowly, as our lips met again, the heat intensified. We stumbled, falling onto the bed nearby, the bath towel slipping off in the movement. After the long, deep kiss ended, I braced myself on Linda's shoulders, breathing heavily. I saw the glimmer in her eyes. Linda struggled to ask, "Is it for her again this time?" "Of course it's for myself." With my mind muddled from the drunkenness and kissing, some words escaped without thinking. "When you see your fiancée just after she showers, having some indescribable thoughts about her is quite normal, isn't it?" My fingertips, still damp, caressed over the mist-covered pink on the snow-white skin, inadvertently stirring. "Besides, I've thought about this since I was 18. Imagining it with you, Linda, only ever with you." The air went still for a moment. Then everything turned upside down. The world felt chaotic, like only we existed. The leftover water droplets evaporated quickly from our high body heat. The swaying ceiling light bobbed around wildly, much like a small boat tossed about by the waves. Before long, only the sound of hurried breathing lingered. I weirdly thought of when I was 18. Of the night after finishing exams, I got drunk and kissed Linda secretly on the balcony. No matter how much I tried, she'd only kiss me. "Ben, we're still young," she whispered in my ear, her body burning with restraint. "Now, Linda." Just saying her name, I was startled by my own raspy voice. Linda paused. Ben lowered his eyes, but Linda's gaze filled with emotions like a thick fog, leaving no room for regrets. Outside, the rain poured heavily, unnoticed. Inside the room, humid steam rose with the light. Linda held my head, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully. "Ben." I remembered the cut on her arm and got worried, trying to sit up to check. Yet the strengthening grip pulled me back. "I told you it's just a small wound." Linda's long fingers dug into my sweaty hair. Her refreshing lemongrass scent started mixing with mine, and the smell of alcohol, blending in that moment. It was 4 a.m. when I tried hard to look back at her. "But your wound really needs a bandage change, and how did you get hurt anyway?" Linda suddenly went silent. In that suffocating quiet, I had a realization. "You wouldn't think I'm probing about you for information from Tina, would you?" She looked at me, implying yes. Feeling both sad and a bit angry, I said, "We've already done this. I told you I'm worried about you, so I asked Tina about their plans against you. Why don't you trust me?" "I trusted you once," Linda said lightly. "These past 2 years, I've trusted you many times, Ben." My throat felt like it was blocked. I blinked, my eyes a little sour, hearing her continue, "But whether I trust you or not isn't important anymore. From now on, no matter how smooth your words, I'll never let you go. As for Tina, she's not as simple as you think." I blurted out, and seeing Linda's frown, took a deep breath. "If I told you in a past life I died by her hand, would you believe me?" The rain beat against the window with no moonlight in sight. Under the dim lighting inside, Linda appeared frozen. "A past life? Linda, have you ever thought we might be characters in a book?" After hesitating, I decided to tell her everything about the original plot's terror. I don't know if it was a dream or a real past life. In short, in a past life, once Tina appeared, it seemed like I could only see her. By the time I finished retelling those 10 years from before, the rain had stopped. Golden hues began spreading across the sky. That last project cost my parents their lives and allowed Tina to take over all my family's assets. She said she hated me because those 10 years by my side were degrading beyond belief. Afterwards, she claimed the shock drove me insane and had me committed to a mental hospital. At this point, I was choked up. Even after so much time passed and everything started over, those 6 months in the asylum remained my nightmare. Being bound, forced medication overwhelming my head, barely any clarity, and regular deadly electric shocks. Eventually, once I cleared up, I made my escape and jumped off the hospital roof. My voice, quivering slightly, was silenced by Linda's sudden embrace and warmth. She stroked through my hair. It was just a dream. I won't let that happen, I heard her say, closing my eyes. I recalled the flames at the wedding, even if I couldn't fight the plot's pull in the dream. When I couldn't save her, as Tina reached peak happiness, I sent her to hell. Linda smelled familiar, and the sleepiness from a sleepless night overtook me. I soon drifted off. In the dream, I returned to the past life. For a decade, Linda and I were like fire and water, worst enemies. Meeting in public, I used the harshest words, sparing no expense to bring her down. Yet she still wore lemongrass-scented perfume. Alive, I hated her too much to notice anything. Until that moment watching flames engulf her, I finally understood. Because that was the 18-year-old Ben before meeting Tina. The last gift I gave Linda. When I woke, the first thing I did was take Linda to the hospital to rebandage her wound. No water and don't strain this arm for 7 days, the doctor instructed seriously. Inside the car, I turned to Linda. Can you tell me how you really got hurt? She looked into my eyes in the dim light, sighed softly and said, it was just a small accident at a project site. I bit my lip. Is it related to Tina? Linda patted my arm. Don't worry. The only way she can hurt me is through you. Just stay away from her, leave the rest to me. But I didn't want that. I grabbed her hand seriously. Linda, I've died once, so you could say I'm older than you now. Whatever you plan against Tina, let me in on it, okay? She was silent for a moment, then quietly replied, okay. Ben, I won't interfere with your decisions. But you should try to stay away from Tina. I nodded, feeling a bit playful. Are you worried I'll get enchanted by Tina again? Linda calmly nodded, but behind her lowered lashes, a hint of vulnerability flashed by. She was scared. I guess even Linda, who started taking over the company at 16, has her fears too. I gently cupped Linda's face and said, seriously, Linda, we've known each other since the day I was born. When I was a sickly kid living in the hospital, you brought flowers and comic books to me every day. When I was 14 and hospitalized again, you bought me soup. After that kiss when we were 18, I've been dreaming about you ever since. Without the mind-bending twists of the original plot, I wouldn't give Tina a second glance. I've always loved you, only you. This seemed like the key to Pandora's box, suddenly unlocking everything. With the soundproof windows up, Linda suddenly reached out and kissed me hard in that closed space. It was intense, causing a tingling pain on my lips, even numbing my tongue from the suction. I suddenly recalled what the doctor advised, wait, your injuries, you can't be too forceful. After that day, Tina didn't contact me for a long time. I asked around at the hospital and found out she managed to get another oncologist through some connections to finish her mother's surgery. That's probably her protagonist's charm. As graduation approached, I decided to start interning at my family's company early. Since our families have long-standing business ties, it meant more legitimate interactions with Linda. I planned to visit Tina's studio later. I sat across from Linda, took a bite of my bagel, and started according to our previous life's timeline. By this point, we had a falling out. I began using family resources to help Tina network, even snatching a crucial project from you. Linda glanced up at me then, her emotions unguarded behind her lashes. I quickly added, I'm just going to test how far her current plans have reached. Wait for me at home for dinner tonight. Tina's studio was not far from downtown. With her initial connections, there was no way she could afford this place without my persistent help. As I walked in, I saw Eric at her desk. Tina sat before him, lowered her head, almost wrapped in his embrace in a suggestive pose. It was just like the last time. I had discovered countless times over about Tina and Eric's peculiar relationship, yet she never confessed. We clashed numerous times over this until the situation spiraled. Whenever I went hysterical, Tina would just stand aside with a tired look. Later, it all became evidence of my supposed oppression and humiliation of her. Snapping back from my memories, I coldly asked, what are you guys doing? The two seemed to freeze. Moments later, Tina straightened up, adjusted her slightly wrinkled clothes, and looked at me. Though she spoke to Eric, you should leave first. Eric shot a resentful glance at me before leaving. Tina turned back to me with that familiar frosty expression. Haven't you chosen Linda already? Why are you looking for me? She still tried the old tricks to manipulate me. If I were the original plot-driven Ben, I would apologize now, say I only loved her, and go out of my way to help her studio, proving that some things only I could provide for her. I lifted my chin. Recently, there's a project at my family's company that was initially planned with Linda's family, but I want to choose you. Tina's eyes shot up to look at me, her throat moving slightly. I smirked, but that project will take a long time and involve massive funds. I need to see how much you can handle first. That evening, I told Linda about what I'd learned, piecing it together with what happened before. I suspected that because I was reborn, the plot had accelerated. Tina had already connected with Leo, the new mob boss in Southtown, way earlier than in the past life. If she were collaborating with someone like that, it was like bargaining with a tiger. Thinking of this, I frowned. Linda, who was flipping through contracts, paused and looked at me. That's because Wendy can no longer help her. I was stunned. The project in the London involved them planting a mole in our subsidiary, stealing account books, and faking things. Wendy and her people are all behind bars now. Turning a page, Linda continued in her usual calm manner. Tina's company is still in its infancy. She's too weak, having to rely on others. I suddenly realized you orchestrated this. Linda didn't disagree, clearly acknowledging it. I blinked and hugged her tightly. Linda, you're amazing. She caught my wandering hand, suddenly looking serious. Ben, you shouldn't get involved in what's next. Why? Because it's dangerous. As she spoke, she furrowed her brows. Tina's identity isn't as simple as you think. Otherwise, Leo wouldn't agree to partner with her so easily. I was taken aback. You said in our past life I chose an intense way to end things with them. Linda's tone was steady but weirdly chilling. It must be because by then there was no other way for me. That night I dreamt again. In a previous life, during the 6th year of my marriage to Tina, at a particular banquet, I saw her standing intimately with Leo's son, John. For some inexplicable reason, I was insanely jealous. In a fit of irrationality, I had people kidnap John, only to end up being taken away by Leo's men. A cold blade pressed against my neck, trailing down my body. I thought I would die right there. Finally, with an indifferent look on her face, Tina walked in and took me away from the gang. Because of this, I always thought in my past life that she only seemed cold on the outside, but had feelings for me inside. But in this dream, felt like a movie suddenly switching scenes. I saw another room with scar-faced Leo sitting there and Linda beside him, expressionless. In front of them was a big screen, frozen on a scene where a dagger was at my throat. Leo chuckled. So, Linda, have you thought about cooperating with me? Linda looked at my tear-stained face with her pretty eyes, not showing any emotion. A few seconds later, she looked away and said, I agree. Let Ben leave safely. Leo smiled in satisfaction. Linda is smart. It's a shame though, if you'd become my woman, we'd be family. Linda replied coldly, I don't need that. After she left, Tina and John walked in. John sighed a bit regretfully. Dad, did Linda agree to work with us? Leo nodded. Her choice in men is terrible. She likes that Ben more than marrying me. He turned and glanced at Tina, smiling. Tina, when are you marrying Eric? I snapped awake. Darkness surrounded me, with only a sliver of moonlight peeking through the window. The dream still lingered in my mind, connecting with all the other bits of information I had, quickly forming a hidden truth from the past life. Ben. A slight movement alerted Linda, who was beside me. She hugged me, paused for a bit, and asked with concern, You're trembling. I knew. I closed my eyes and took in her familiar, fresh scent. I knew Linda. Tina is Leo's illegitimate daughter. Leo agreed to work with her now because they've already recognized each other as father and daughter. Linda didn't care about Tina's true identity. She just hugged me tighter. What did you dream about? She asked. I hugged her upper body, my voice choking up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Linda. I finally realized that in the past life, under Tina and Leo's plans, I became a hostage. Linda's business got tainted with darkness. That's why, in the end, Linda chose to go down with everyone at that grand wedding. Lucky for us, in this life, I've woken up from the trap of the original plot. There's still time. Once I calmed down, I told Linda about the dream. Her hand on my back suddenly tightened, her voice carrying a chilling coldness. John, huh? I get it. Under my deliberate guidance, I quickly facilitated a project collaboration with Tina's studio. Leo got involved too, even though it was still early times, and he hadn't yet taken full control of the seaside city like in the past. The project left a lot of loose ends. Linda collected all of them, preparing to use them as evidence to bring her justice. But recently Linda stopped contacting me. That afternoon when I went to her company, I saw a bright pink sports car downstairs. The driver door opened and a familiar figure stepped out. I froze. It was John, looking several years younger. I watched him walk to the other side and open the door. Then Linda got out, smiling softly. Whatever she said made John laugh. He pulled a letter-like envelope from his bag and handed it to her, then drove off. Linda stood there, her gaze scanning the area. When she glanced at my car, she paused briefly. I was sure she recognized me, yet she turned away calmly and went upstairs as if she hadn't seen anything. A wave of sourness swallowed me. Is this how Linda felt all those times she saw me with Tina? I got out of the car and went upstairs to find Linda in her office. She looked up from behind her desk. Why didn't you knock? I replied sourly, does John need to knock when he visits? Linda paused, then quietly walked to the adjacent lounge. Standing inside, she looked at me. Come here. I walked over reluctantly. The moment I stepped into the lounge, the door closed swiftly behind me. My back pressed against the cold, hard door while every inch of me was wrapped in Linda's warmth. Her wet kisses trailed slowly from my lips to my ear. Linda knew me too well, including how I'd react, my limits, and what each shiver meant. I felt like I was being thrown up into the clouds, and then suddenly dropped into an endless ocean. Linda. I managed to whisper her name before being swept into another wave of blissful sea. In the end, before being completely submerged by the waves, I heard her voice by my ear. Have you checked completely? I'm still all yours. I had turned the letter John gave Linda over and over in my hand, only to find it was an invitation to his birthday party. As the main project lead, I got one too. It'll be dangerous. I prefer if you don't go. Linda looked at me with clear, glassy eyes. But will you listen to me, Ben? I honestly shook my head, nope. Then quickly added, because logically we're working together now and it's going well. If I skip out for no reason, it might raise suspicion. The argument was solid, and even Linda couldn't refute it. She held my gaze for a moment, then leaned in to kiss me again. No matter what happens, Ben, remember your safety comes first. Soon enough, John's birthday party arrived. Ben's project was actually in collaboration with the government, so a lot of powerful people attended. Tina, being a part of this joint venture, successfully broadened her network. I was holding a drink, watching Eric follow her around with a cold look. He must have sensed my gaze because he suddenly turned around and shot me a smug, challenging glance. Then, almost like he was making a point, he wrapped Tina's arm in his. You're more than welcome to keep such trash. Scanning the room, I noticed quite a few familiar faces among the guests. These were people Tina was supposed to meet many years later. Is everything happening earlier because of Linda's intervention? Just as I was piecing it all together, the guest of honor, John, appeared. He had his arm linked with Leo's, with Linda standing smiling calmly on his other side. Welcome, everyone, to my birthday party, he said cheerfully, his eyes lingering on me with a hint of satisfaction. A server rolled out a giant 3-tier cake. After cutting it, John and Linda mingled with the guests, soon reaching me. Mr. G, let's hope our future projects are pleasant collaborations. John smiled before turning to Linda. I heard you were once close with Mr. G, even had a childhood marriage promise? Linda gave me a fleeting glance and then indifferently looked away. Just our parents joking around, nothing to take seriously. Besides, Ben has someone else now. We have nothing to do with each other. Even though I knew she was just acting, it still made me grit my teeth. After a moment, I sneered. I'm the one who should thank Linda for finally letting me go. With that, she walked away with John. I held my drink and quickly spotted Tina near the garden windows. She was on the phone and Eric was nowhere in sight. I noticed her expression gradually turn serious at whatever was being said on the other end. Outside, the night sky lit up with fireworks, meant for John's birthday celebration but perfectly masking the gunfight from a discovered mob arsenal nearby. Recalling Linda's earlier warning, I calmly retreated to a corner, preparing to slip away through the garden path. Just as I was about to leave, a bloodied figure staggered in through the main door. Leo, our deal's been exposed. A gunshot rang out, and a massive crystal chandelier crashed to the floor, echoing a thunderous boom. Then darkness enveloped the hall, sending it into chaos. Wanting to avoid the chaos, I stayed hidden, watching as the undercover police took down each of Leo's men one by one. Ben, Linda's voice finally reached my ears. She slipped to my side under cover of darkness, whispering, "Leo's power runs deep. There might be more to come. Let's get out of here." I nodded, feeling the tension start to leave my body. We managed to avoid the chaotic crowd and reach the garden. The night breeze carried a mixed floral scent, but then I caught a whiff of something off. It felt like a warning from another life. My eyes widened. I shoved Linda to the ground, rolling us both away. A hail of bullets churned the ground where we had just been. I got up unsteadily, but a black pistol barrel quickly targeted me. "It's you," Tina said coldly, holding the gun, her eyes filled with anger. "If you like me, why do you keep sabotaging my career and chances to advance? If you admire me, you should be willing to give freely, asking for nothing in return. You claim to like me but only ever look down on me with pity. Ben, you make me sick." Even in this second chance at life, I was rendered speechless by Tina's shameless words. So that's how she saw things. No matter how I tried to help her, she viewed it as humiliation. In her heart, my assistance should have come without strings attached. Do I really look like a chump to her? Her twisted logic infuriated me. We barely know each other. You should be grateful I helped you. If you find it insulting, throw the money in my face and tell me you made it on your own without dirty money. But you didn't. The truth is, even with Leo, you needed me and Ben to land your projects. Without my help, you're just a failure. The more I spoke, the paler Tina's face became. But she gritted her teeth. "You, born with a silver spoon, wouldn't understand. This has nothing to do with birth," Linda suddenly chuckled, cutting her off. "If you keep blaming everything else, even if you were born into our family, nothing would change. Just like now, despite finding your real father, you still have to sell yourself for opportunities." Her eyes were disdainful, unapologetic. It was like she was prepared for this. As Tina, in a fit of rage, pulled the trigger, Linda shoved me to the side. Multiple shots fired. Bullets tore through flesh, leaving smoky blood blossoms. Warm drops splashed my face. All I saw was endless red and Linda's eyes slowly closing. "Linda!" The hospital room reeked of disinfectant, completely overwhelming Linda's lemongrass scent. I sat by her bed, gritting my teeth. "Are you crazy or something?" Her eyelashes fluttered, and she looked at me with this gentle, lingering gaze. "Sorry, Ben. I just wanted to try something out. After all the efforts we've made to break free from that inevitable force, I wanted to see if your past life's ending would still play out." That's why she deliberately provoked Tina to shoot at her. In fact, the undercover cops noticed someone missing in the chaotic hall and chased after her. Just as Tina fired, they pulled the trigger too, hitting her hand and temple. If the original storyline's influence couldn't be shaken off, Linda would surely die by Tina's gun. But instead, the shot only grazed her shoulder, not lethal at all. "But seriously, did you have to risk your life to test it? This way is the most foolproof," she said. Her lips were colorless from the blood loss, but her eyes didn't leave mine for a moment. "If I really died, Tina would undoubtedly get the death penalty. You wouldn't have any contact with her anymore, and you wouldn't be sent to a mental institution. You'd live your peaceful life, Ben." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper, feather light as it drifted into my ear. "I promised you I'd never let the things you dreamed about happen." I stared at her, words stuck in my throat, unable to speak. She was definitely a bit crazy gambling with her life like that. But if she won, it proved we could escape the shadow of our past lives. If she lost, her death would mean a safe life for me. I remembered the injections from my past life, the fall from a tall building. I remembered Linda's tearful gaze in a dim room and Tina's wedding, where flames erupted suddenly. I remembered Linda's lemongrass scent that never changed. Overcome by emotion, I grabbed her collar, leaned in and bit her lip hard. Blood's metallic taste filled my mouth. "No," I said, "your life is mine." "Okay, it's yours," Linda said, her once cold eyes now warm and tender. "Everything of mine is yours." In the days that followed, Linda managed to connect with John and uncovered information from him, aiding the police in busting a multi-billion weapons trade. Because of their involvement in organized crime, murder, and illegal firearm possession, Tina, Leo, John, and others were sentenced to death. All the guests at the birthday dinner in Leo's secret network were being investigated. Eric, though not directly involved, got 2 years for his auxiliary role. and Ben's subsequent projects smoothly continued with Linda's cooperation. This work gave me more time to be with Linda, but no matter how she tried to tease me, I always kept a straight face and refused her. Your injuries aren't healed yet. Let's talk after you're fully recovered. I couldn't help but add, drinking wine with a gunshot wound? Do you have a death wish? Linda, soaked in her long gown from the shower water, opened her eyes, still clouded by a tipsy haze. She smiled at me, indulgent yet resigned. Sorry, Ben. She was teasing me again. I swallowed hard, feigning indifference as I tossed the shower to her. Wash yourself, I'm out. In the steam-filled bathroom, I had barely taken a few steps when I heard something heavy fall. After a moment of hesitation, my worry for Linda won out. I turned back quickly, and she pulled me, and we both fell into the huge round tub. With a splash, water flew everywhere. I couldn't help but scream, my custom suit that just arrived last week. She murmured near my ear, I'll buy you 10 more tomorrow, her breath warm and close. Ben. Her kisses landed on my lips, tender yet demanding, until a subtle stinging forced her away reluctantly. Her warmth drifted lower under the water. Linda. I breathed out, my voice trembling, but her heated kisses swallowed it whole. Guided by her, I plunged into a humid tropical jungle. A sudden rain, cool to the touch, streamed into deeper waters. We tangled till late at night, and I finally fell asleep. In a haze I dreamt again, unsure if it was the past or present. In the dream, Tina hadn't appeared yet. I wore my high school uniform, finding a love letter from a girl in my backpack. The scene shifted like a movie. The girl stood with a group of thugs, eyes full of malice. Ben? So what? Once I lure him out and spike his drink, we'll have our way with him. The next day on her way to school, she was hit by a speeding car, breaking her leg. In the stark white hospital room, Linda entered emotionless. This is a warning. Any more thoughts like that, who knows what might break next?